All right, everybody. So in this section, we're going to talk all about productivity tips for remote sales and working from home, right? Because if you're going to work from home, you want to make sure you're effective, you're using your time effectively, and you're getting results for you and your company. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about time blocking, right? You want to block time on your calendar for deep work, and you want to focus the rest of your time on everything else. So let me go ahead and show you what I mean. So in the beginning of your day, right? Let's say you're starting from, you're working from like 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., okay? In the beginning of your day, usually it's around the first 4 hours, you want to focus on the most difficult and important task, right? And you want to make sure you do that at the beginning of the day. So that's going to be blocking out 2 to 4 hours of deep work. And when I mean deep, it's just really focused hours going hard at the thing that's most important. So if you are a business and sales development rep, your deep work will probably be sales prospecting, generating meetings with potential customers that your company wants to work with. So someone like either an account executive or someone who closes, or even yourself, can actually close the deal. So if you're a sales and business development rep, your job during this deep work is to find as many companies that you want to work with, write the emails, cold call or LinkedIn messages, and actually send them out and generate appointments. And you want to focus everything you got during those first 2 to 4 hours on getting those results, okay? Because that's going to be the most important factor when it comes to succeeding in your role. And if you are a closer or an account executive, you want to focus, your important time here usually on closing deals and doing the activities that actually turn prospects into paying customers, whether that's presentations, having discovery calls, doing follow-up emails, and basically the touch points that are very important that you do not want to mess up. You want to do it during this time. You want to turn off all notifications, turn off all distractions, anything that can pull you away from doing your deep work. You want to make sure that you are untouchable during this time and you can focus on results. And then from there, once you do 2 to 4 hours of deep work, and I personally, for myself and for many people, doing more than 4 hours of deep work per day is actually quite difficult. Even when you're starting out, doing 2 hours a day is quite difficult as well. But I would shoot for 4 hours, and then the rest of the day, let's say you're working, 4 hours of deep work and then 4 hours of everything else. That's when you want to do everything else, whether it's meetings, admin, updating the CRM and things like that. Things that, even if you mess up, doesn't really make a big impact on whether or not you're successful in the role. That's when you want to do everything else, right? So if you're working from 8 to 12, doing deep work, meaning you're doing the things that matter, meetings, generating meetings, doing presentations and demos during that time. And then after 12 to the rest of the day, it's lunch, and then you do everything else. Now, if you're having meetings, sometimes, you have to schedule a meeting, outside of your deep work hours, and that's totally okay. But you want to just make sure that you want to focus most of your time doing the most important stuff at the beginning of the day when you have the most willpower and energy to do it. Now, the next tip I have for you when it comes to being productive from working remotely is you want to create a comfortable working environment, right? Especially if you are working from home. So you want to make sure you have a fast or acceptable internet speed, because if you're working from home, internet is basically everything. It's going to determine how fast you can research things online, and it's going to determine the quality of your calls and your video conference, because if you have really slow internet, it's just going to be very difficult to communicate with other people. You want to make sure that your working environment is not noisy or distracting, even if you are not on calls, right? Because if you have kids, you have a dog or things like that, and they're always making noise, well, that's not going to be good when it comes to focusing on your work. And if you're going to do video calls or conference calls, or even if there's no video, but it's just, audio call, well, first of all, for video calls, you want to make sure you have good audio and video. And if it's just audio, you want to make sure the audio is good as well. And that really comes down to fast internet, or using, you're calling someone with a good cellular connection where, you're not going to be cut off every 10 seconds, right? And if you're doing video call, you want to make sure that the background is very acceptable for business, okay? So you can't just have random laundry and stuff in the back, because every time you make a call and someone looks at your laundry behind you, that's going to be quite weird, and their perception of you is not going to be that great. So I'm not saying you have to completely deck out your background, but you can even have just a blank wall or a painting. Just make it simple. You don't have to try too hard, but you just want to make sure that it's acceptable for work and that it's not something people will judge you negatively on. And when you are doing calls, right, or doing deep work or focus time, you want to create do not disturb rules, especially if you're working from home, right? So if you're going to be on an important meeting or important call, do it in a separate room, close the door, create a sign on the door and say do not disturb, and make sure everyone in your house knows that when this sign is up and the door is closed, you cannot be disturbed, right? Because, it's, I've done this before where, you're on a sales meeting remotely and then someone's like knocking on your door, they want to ask you something, and, that's really not the time to get that done unless it's an emergency. That's totally different. But if it's just like something so basic like, hey, do you want me to pick something up from you from the store? Like, that does not need to happen during your sales calls. So make sure you create do not disturb rules at your home or wherever you're working remotely. And what's really important that I found from working from home is that you want to separate your work life from your personal life. Meaning, if you have a workstation, like whether it's a desk and your laptop's there and everything, you kind of want to separate that from your everyday regular life, because, if you are working in the same place that you play and, hang out and chill, well, it doesn't feel like you're ever going to stop working, right? Because it feels like you're always on. So you want to make sure you have a place for working, even if it's just a small little corner, which is your office. Separate your work and life, and then it's going to help you build balance so you don't always feel like your brain is on, and you can actually rest and relax and come back to work the next day. And the next productivity tip I have for you is going to be to record your sales calls and internal meetings. Okay. So, you want to record your sales calls, especially whenever possible, right? And depending on what country you live in, there may be some certain rules you have to follow when it comes to that, whether it's to let the other person know that you're going to record. And I find that, totally normal to ask that or have that automated at the beginning of the call before people join. But make sure whatever country you live in, you know what the rules are. And it's important to record your calls because when you're doing sales calls, right, you want to reference your recordings to find areas where you can improve. So you want to see like, okay, are my presentations doing well? Or, the way I'm closing, are people resonating with it? Do I need to change my pricing or my offer? And the only real way to really refer back to it is if you have your calls recorded. And it's really good because if you are, selling in person, well, you can't really record anything. You don't know. You might remember what happened differently and you might be wrong and things like that. But if you're selling online, the beauty of it is that you can record your calls, you can look at it and see what you can improve. You can, send it to your sales manager and they can give you advice, or your peers, and they'll say, okay, I think you can improve this part, and you'll make those changes, right? So that's why selling is an iterative process, and you got to, see what you can improve on over time, and that's how you get better. And you also want to record your internal meetings sometimes. You may not always want to, but it doesn't hurt to. And the reason is because sometimes you might miss something in a meeting or an important detail. So instead of, having to call that person back or send them a message, you can just refer back to your internal meeting and just, get the notes. And because, you're recording internally, there shouldn't really be a problem with other people recording or asking them to record the call because, you're all working internally and you're all working together towards a common goal. So this is going to save you a lot of time, especially when it comes to improving your sales process. So if you follow these 3 tips, I'm pretty confident that your productivity and your ability to get results in sales is going to improve dramatically. So with that said, I am going to see you guys in the next lesson.